and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Michael Schwartz. He's a board-certified plastic surgeon in private practice in Westlake Village, California, which is in the Los Angeles area. And he's been doing that for more than 25 years. Now, his practice includes an on-site, state-of-the-art surgical facility, an in-house luxurious aftercare suite, a non-surgical center called The Spa, and a whole lot of staff that we'll talk about. Now, he's a national educator for Sientra and Mentors breast implants and trains other surgeons on his innovative techniques on behalf of ASPS and the Aesthetic Society. Now, Dr. Schwartz has authored numerous papers as well as book chapters and is an invited speaker at multiple national plastic surgery meetings. On the personal side, Dr. Schwartz and his wife of 35 years, that's miracle status, are active in supporting Interface Children and Family Services to support those affected by domestic violence, human trafficking, natural disasters, mental health, and homelessness. Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for joining me on Beauty and the Biz.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Oh, so nice to have you. So what I like to do is just go back your 26 years, I guess it's been, and how did you get from like fellowship to, I don't even know if they had fellowship in those days. How did you get to private practice?
Well, it wasn't that long ago. The dinosaurs weren't quite that big then. So for me, the path was always to private practice. When I went to medical school, I went to Baylor, and Mel Spiro was the chairman of plastic surgery there. And he told me, you're not going to tell anybody you're going to be a plastic surgeon. You're going to go do your general surgery. And then once you're done with that, then you apply to plastic surgery, because general surgeons don't like people to be plastic surgeons. They think they're wasting their efforts. So I kind of tried to do that, but eventually, obviously, people knew that's what I wanted to do. I spent 4 years in the Air Force between the two residencies. I had to have somebody pay for me getting from point A to point B. So I actually spent 4 years as a surgeon in the Air Force, which was a key part of learning the business side of things, because during that time I was actually the chief of surgery, had to run the department of surgery, had to do the hospital's first joint commission inspection. So it really actually helped me a lot in terms of how I was going to manage my practice in the future, more than I knew at the time. I think I was just miserable at the time, but later, looking back on it, it was very helpful. I went to UT Southwestern and trained, and because I had spent that time in the military and knew that there was a lot more to practicing than just doing the surgery itself, I actually literally picked on every office manager and patient coordinator of all the aesthetic practices that we rotated to. I stole their paperwork. I stole their protocols. I got anything I could beg or steal that wasn't obviously what I was getting in the operating room, so that when I would go out into practice, I could hopefully implement some of that without having to reinvent the wheel. When I first started my practice, I joined another surgeon. I had 2 kids already. I really didn't know about the whole idea of starting by myself. I didn't feel confident in that. And if I had to look back on it, that's going to be one of those questions you'll ask me, which is, what would I do different? And that's the one I would do. And we can talk about that later. But I joined him. He was a very busy surgeon, technically excellent, but our business acumen was very, very different. And financially, he wasn't really doing well, even though he was a busy surgeon. He didn't run the business any way that I would. And eventually I left and went out on my own. That was 2008. So about 9 years after I started in clinical practice.
And then how did you end up in Westlake Village versus LA or Beverly Hills?
So I grew up in Santa Barbara, and my wife grew up in the Los Angeles Valley area. So we knew we wanted to be somewhere in Southern California. I literally sent letters to everybody from Santa Barbara to Orange County. And at the time it was, people were busy, but they weren't that busy. And I got a lot of really nice letters back saying, hey, I'll help you any way I can, but I don't need anything. And I joined the surgeon that was kind of halfway between my practices in Santa Barbara. But we lived in Westlake because it was an easy commute. Because we didn't like the actual community where the practice was, but we loved being 10 miles down the road, which is another lesson probably as well. But anyway, so that practice offered me a great salary. I thought this was a really nice gentleman. He was a technically excellent surgeon with a really busy aesthetic practice. And it seemed like a great opportunity for me to get busy doing that part. Although I very much expected to do reconstructive surgery for quite some time to, earn my stripes.
Hmm. But were you an associate, a contractor? How did you join his
I
practice?
started as an employee. I was given a salary with a bonus clause. After you earned a certain amount, then you could earn bonus up over and above that. And after 2 years, I was doing well enough where I decided to buy into that practice, and I actually bought 50% of that practice. It was great because it wasn't 49 or it wasn't 51, it was 50%. And I stayed as a partner in that practice for the next 7 years and change. When I left, it was not so great, as you gather from the way most of those things go. And I took 50% of the hard assets. I didn't get any of the goodwill money that I paid back, obviously. I was already generating more than my 50% of the revenue in the practice, and none of that was really being recognized. And basically, I was that person's retirement plan instead of their own retirement plan. And so, among many other reasons, I left. And it was hard because he was a really nice man, but business wise, it was never going to work.
So you had to walk away from some equity?
I did. I walked away from equity in that practice. I had to. There really wasn't a choice. We actually tried. We actually brought in a third party arbitrator to say what would be fair in arranging, his exit strategy. The plan that was offered by myself and my attorneys and my accountants was deemed very equitable. And he literally told me to my face, "You'd have been better." He said in his words, "I would have been better off if you would have never come." And I thought, well, you've made more money than you've ever made before. You haven't taken call in 9.5 years. You only work 7.5 months a year. So once you let me know what part of, I haven't slept with the staff, I've never been sued. Whatever part of you'd have been better off, you let me know what that is. But that was just my invitation to say bye-bye. And so I did.
Was there a non-compete involved?
They're not legal in California, so it was a non-issue.
But at that time, weren't they?
No, there was not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how far away did you set up new shop from there?
Well, my new office is literally 5 minutes from my home, and it's about 10 to 15 minutes down the freeway, closer to Los Angeles, which was also huge. Number one, practicing in your own community finally, because there were two different hospitals, one over the hill where that practice was, and one in our community. And then all of the people that we knew from our home, from our country club, from our friend groups. Now my office was right here, and I have a very amazing wife who's, got a great social circle. She's got a great business mind. She's got a great, strategic way of thinking, and she was a huge part in helping me build the practice here once we moved.
Was she ever the receptionist and the
No,
coordinator and
she
the office
wasn't.
manager?
So she was not. So in the very beginning, in the other practice that I was in, the other physician's wife was all of those things, and kind of a more traditional path that you would actually expect. When my wife and I came in, she was adamant that my wife would not be any part of that practice. And then when I got to see what happened in that practice with the wife working in the office, number one, ultimately, I had to ask her to leave that practice when I was a 50% owner because it wasn't working. And number two, I knew that when my practice opened down in my current location, that while my wife would help me in every way, she wasn't going to be in the office every day. And that has worked out fantastically because my wife is amazing and she's got such savvy and she watches things and does what she needs to, although she gets to do a lot less of it now because the practice has changed and I have amazing staff that we count on for all of that. But in the beginning, she had her hand on everything without physically being there every day.
Yeah, I've seen it go either way. The wife can be your biggest asset or also the biggest thorn if she doesn't have the right mindset or the values or the skills. The staff struggles with the wife coming and going, zipping in, zipping out.
Right.
So it just depends, who you got there. But what's important to know is she an asset and is she helping or hurting,
Yeah, exactly. And so she's always been a help, but luckily we've been able to do it in a way where she's not here every day and the staff knows that, Jerry's going to see what happens, but it's not necessarily so much that she's going to be here, snooping over you and getting in your way of doing your job and just being comfortable in your workspace.
Yeah.
So,
when you got your location, did you have to do a build out for the OR facility?
I did. So I'm in my second office since I moved in by myself. The first office that I had when I moved out. We were actually quite smart. Again, my wife's idea, to give her credit. When I was thinking about leaving that other office, we actually rented out some satellite space so that like once a week I could see patients down here. And then when I actually left, we used that as a temporary office. I rented a new space, and I did a build out of an office and an OR, quad ASF OR in that space.
In the space you're in not right now?
No, in the pre. So I had a temporary office I used. I rented an office back then. That was whatever, 16 years ago. After a 10-year lease in that space, then we actually built the current space that we're in now. So we built an OR in the first space. I actually ended up selling that to somebody else when I left that space and built this one. And then when we left that, we built out this bigger space. I actually bought this building and built out this space.
Everybody says the biggest regret they have is not buying the building. Yeah.
Best thing I ever did, for sure.
Hear it all the time.
The control of it, the tax benefits, the ownership later, it's absolutely the smartest thing to do.
And the peace of mind knowing nobody can kick you out, you know?
That's right.
Can you put external signage on that? I know that area well.
Yeah.
Do they allow external signage?
They do. They have some really strict limits on how tall the sign can be, or how shiny the sign can be, or what color you even paint your building. We definitely have external signage. You can see from the street, it says the Schwartz Aesthetic Institute. So definitely we're visible.
Good. So we have to talk about your associate, because now you brought another surgeon on board, and
Correct.
That's always the big question. How did you pick that person?
Right.
What variables or criteria did you use to say this is a good fit, and how's it going?
Great. So it was an interesting process for me. I think the first part was determining when I wanted to do it. So for me, that part came as I got busier and my waiting list got long. And obviously, if you're tracking things, you know that people are falling off your waiting list, and that's a negative. But there's nothing you can do about it if you're a solo provider. There's only so many hours in the day. So once we realized that was starting to happen at a rate that felt predictable and long-standing, I felt like it was time to bring somebody in. Number one, because I would like to capture those people in the practice, and number two, because that's a responsibility to that associate. I knew that, number one, I could start making a list of people for her to see before she came. And number two, once she came, that there should be a continuous stream of more people that when they call and it's 6 months to get an appointment with me and they don't want to wait that long, once she gets herself established, that some of those patients at least will be willing to see her, at least for a consult. And so at that point, we knew it was time to start looking for someone. I interviewed several people. I interviewed somebody from my residency program that did an aesthetic fellowship. I interviewed another gentleman from another program, and they just weren't the right fit personally. I didn't feel like we jived together well. Personally, they were great surgeons and they had great recommendations. The amazing story about the young woman that I've hired is that she actually chose to have a destination wedding in Malibu. My patient coordinator used to work as a wedding coordinator on the weekend because it was her job years before. And so she was helping someone and she ended up doing this person's wedding. And when they met and she realized she was a plastic surgeon, then they kind of kept in touch. And then a few years later, she reached out to her when I started looking for someone, and then we interviewed her. So when we interviewed her, she had unbelievable letters of recommendation. She had been working in New York in another practice for a couple of years and wanted to move out here. I literally called up all the reps from all the companies I knew and said, hey, can you check with your rep in New York and see what they know about this person? I talked to her program director from where she trained, who said basically that I was an idiot if I didn't hire her, which is kind of one of the recommendations that somebody wrote for me once upon a time. So those kind of statements don't go lightly with me. And then obviously we brought her out to meet. And when I met her, she's unbelievably lovely. She's an artist in her own right besides surgery. So her aesthetic is amazing. And I really enjoyed my time with her, so that I looked at like, what would it be to have this person in literally the office next door to me every day. And that seemed really positive. So that's kind of how it transpired.
How long has it been going on?
So she's about to be 2 years with me, except for maternity leave. It's been a great 2 years. Obviously, it was hard not having her out during that time. But she's an unbelievable surgeon. My staff loves her. The patients love her. Obviously, I'm very comfortable when I have the opportunity to be out of town that she's taking care of my patients, which is great. And she's been very progressively developing a very nice practice of her own. I don't tend to price very competitively. And when she came in, we didn't price her very different, just slightly less. So she's already staying on the high end of things and gathering her own business. So we're staying on brand is my point.
Gotcha. And any tips on, was that just pure luck? Was that just really good vetting?
Well, I think it was both. To be honest, there's definitely a luck component. I mean, if she hadn't had her wedding out here, she would have never known about me. And I
But how
think,
did she just happen to have a husband who was okay to move out to Westlake Village,
yeah.
California?
Well, he's an emergency room physician, so his job was a lot more mobile. They have one young child and now two, and he's happy being at home a little bit. And so his career path was flexible where they could do that. And I think that they both loved California, and I'm sure she talked him into it. I don't know, she's a very convincing young woman. So
She's gorgeous.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
inside and out.
oh, that's nice. Is she buying in? Is she still an employee, a contractor, an
So
associate?
right now she's an employee, and we're actually going to start looking. This is about the time we're going to start looking at how that moves to the next phase. Whether that's a change to a partner and how that partnership buy-in comes in. Whether it's going to be something that she can pay. Whether I have to be the bank and give her a loan for her part of it. We'll have an appraiser come in. I have an attorney that I work with that'll help us with that. So we'll having gone through that myself, my spin on it is that there's something that's fair in that for both sides, and not to screw it up either way, because I think that's what happened to me that wasn't fair. So my job is to get the value that I think I deserve for what I provide. At the same time, my job and responsibility to her is to make it something that's reasonable, so that this becomes a success for everyone. So that's the goal. Obviously, the asterisk in that is private equity and third parties buying practices. My feeling at this point is that she needs to be my partner, which makes us more attractive to all those people. A lot of those companies are more interested in med spa than they are in surgical practices. So we'll see how that goes.
Right. All right. We'll get back to that. I want to talk about your staff, because when I was researching you, I was very surprised to count up an office manager and a practice manager, two coordinators, two front desk coordinators who are also MAs, one front desk coordinator who's also the marketing coordinator, a head clinical RN, two MAs, one PA, one NP, six RNs, one esthetician, an OR supervisor, two surgical techs, and three anesthesiologists. I'm assuming they're part-time, but that's 26 people.
Right.
That is a lot for one surgeon. Well, two surgeons now, but
right.
What are you doing with all that staff?
Well, so we run a busy med spa, so that's part of it. I have 5 in clinical injectors. I have one physician assistant and 4 RNs, some full-time, some part-time. My OR, a lot of the nursing staff are obviously part-time employees because they're moms or they have other jobs, and so not all of those are certainly full-time people. My OR nurse, my head nurse, is a full-time employee. My nurse in the front office is my full-time employee. She's been with me for 10 years. And then I have my coordinator, if you will, is my wife, Jerry. So she's kind of a very part-time employee at this point. My office manager is obviously full-time as well. But we have a very busy, successful practice, and a lot of the front desk people also help, bring patients into the med spa and back. They help do some of our wellness injections because they are MAs as well, so they can do, we have the GLP-1s in the practice and other things. And then on the practice side, I have front receptionists that can also come into the back when we need them, cover for when people are out. My nurse is on maternity leave, so we're pulling people all the time now. Each of the surgeons has a medical assistant, which works beautifully in terms of all of the work that needs to be done to coordinate pre and post-op and all the things that happen. And each of the surgeons has their own patient coordinator.
Out of 100% pie, how much of the revenues are non-surgical versus surgical?
I would say at this point, it's probably 70% surgical and 30% non-surgical.
Okay. And are you comfortable with it that way?
I am. Obviously, we're continuing to grow the med spa. I think that's a huge, revenue generator and passive income. It's the only passive income we have in plastic surgery. So that, at least in terms of what I have to do or what my partner, my associate, Dr. Stark, has to do. And it allows us to, kind of have that feedback between the med spa and the clinical practice where, obviously we refer patients each way through those entities. And building up the med spa builds up the practice for sure. And it provides a continuity of care.
How competitive is it down there with med spas? Are they also on every corner like they are up in Northern California?
They are 100%. They're everywhere. And, I think the trick is you can compete on price, you can compete on quality, but you can't probably compete on both.
Yeah.
And so we're not a discount practice in anything that we do. And, dollar per unit or whatever you want to look at, I know we're more than other places. But like I said, I have a busy, successful practice. Most of my injectors, my clinical people in the med spa are trainers for some of the companies. So we really give a level of care that's exceptional. And I think that makes all the difference.
How do you manage the staff when some are full-time, some are part-time? The consistency can get lost at times, and it sounds like you have a really good standard of excellence.
Yeah.
How do you get that point across so they know you're a quality operation, you expect them to be on their A game, you don't care if they work 10 hours a week or 40 hours a week. I find that the culture can be sidestepped when not everybody's on the same page with the full-time versus part-time. Do you find that at all, or how do you keep people cohesive?
I don't find that. And ultimately, I hope that that's because it comes from the top, right? If I deliver the care that patients expect and my entire staff sees that, they know my expectations. Dr. Stark is equally, everything has to be just so all the time. And so I think that expectation and that culture runs through the practice because it's what's delivered from me down. We have monthly meetings with the staff. We bring in consultants to help with this. There's Allergan practice consultants. There's other groups that can come in and take your staff through cultural values and teach them to how to look at those things, both for the practice, but also for themselves. And building that, that integral, what's important to me as I help Dr. Schwartz, not just what's important to Dr. Schwartz, gives them some autonomy. It gives them, it empowers them to take that authority that I'm giving them and do their best job. And I think they feel that. So.
Well, I saw your holiday party. That was killer. So you're motivating them with that, but are there any other incentives or, I don't know, commissions, bonuses, anything else you're doing to keep this group thinking for the good of the practice?
Sure. So obviously, staff members can have surgery when they've been here long enough and meet certain criteria, and we take care of them that way. For the key employees in the practice, my patient coordinator, my manager, my nurse, my medical assistants, we definitely incentivize them based on metrics. So using a practice consultant like yourself, we measure every step of our practice. What is the percent of people who make a phone call? How many of those people from phone call to consult? How many people from making the consult to showing up for their consult? How many of those people schedule surgery? How many people keep their surgical schedule? And we literally bonus on every one of those steps for the key employee who's responsible for that step. And using that as motivation, we also bonus on year-end growth for the appropriate people. So we really try to take care of our employees so that they know that, number one, what they do affects the outcome of the practice, and number two, when we are achieving our goals, that they get to share in that success.
Now, some of the practices have found that there was some us and them kind of mentality when there was full-time versus part-time. So then they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a percentage of all revenues, percentage of profits this month, this quarter, this year. We're going to divvy up that percentage based on hours worked. So that seems to have helped a lot for incentives. My one issue is one practice does it annually, and I say, no, in today's world, we want to be incentivized way sooner than a year. I can't remember, who knows what's going to happen a year from now. So I think it should be more monthly because people forget quickly. Have you found that the staff has changed at all? It's more difficult to get them on board and keep them on board and keeping your values and your vision in front of them?
I would say no in my practice. I think it's a super valid concern because I think we see it, around the rest of the world that we all live in places that we work or shop or whatever. So I feel very fortunate. I think we have amazing hires and amazing staff. I think that, the first thing we tell people when they come into the practice is if you don't get along, you don't stay. I have made that mistake personally, and it's probably the biggest mistake I ever made was allowing employees to dictate the spirit of the practice, the way the practice runs, because I thought they were such a key employee, I couldn't lose them, and that's a huge mistake because there's a lot of amazing people out there just waiting to be hired if you treat them right, and if they're not treating you right, then they don't belong. And for me, that's been the most important lesson, I think.
I agree. And do it sooner. Free them sooner than later. My Lord.
100%.
It just simmers and simmers and everyone's upset. And then when you finally let them go, the other people say, well, that took you a long time. It's like, why didn't you tell me? And
Exactly. I can't tell you that I haven't lived that. It's a very personal truth.
yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing a good job with that. I'm just wondering where you're finding people because I don't even do HR anymore because it's such a crapshoot. I can't find good, solid people who want to, they insist on doing hybrid. They kept saying to me, is this a hybrid? And I'm like, a hybrid what?
Right.
And it turns out they just want to work a couple days a week. The rest they'll do it at home. And I said, no. This is a real job, a 9 to 5, real job. Right. We need to see you, and
we had some employees that were like that, and it didn't work. They were with me a long time, and they were great people, really great people, and it didn't work. And so now everybody that's here is basically a full-time employee, at least in, not in the surgery center, but pretty much everywhere else. We don't do any work from home. We've done it with a few key employees for maternity leaves. And obviously that's just trying to be sensitive to, the change in their personal world with a new baby. And the fact that they wanted to be back at work, but they couldn't be all the time. But then once that period was over, then everyone's back to full-time work. So.
Yeah, well, you seem to have figured this out. But I have noticed the number one challenge would be staff. And just when you think you have it figured out, something else happens. So right. It's just a challenge. It just always will be. So you're very business minded. And then I was looking at your CV, and you actually went to Kellogg School of Management.
I did.
So what was that all about? Because that's very unusual.
Right. So for me, I've always known that physicians are not the greatest businessmen, and that wasn't, necessarily my greatest strength. And it really got pointed out to me in 2008, 2009, when I moved my practice. The economy took a dive, and I was by myself trying to run a new business. And there was a course that came out that was called the Physician CEO Program. It was a 1-year program that a guy named Guy Kazarian started after he did an MBA. He's an ophthalmologist and a really brilliant, wonderful guy. And it was for cash-based medicine. It wasn't a true MBA, but it was all of the best cherry-picked courses of an MBA at Kellogg, one of the greatest business schools in the country. So it was a year-long program where you went for 4 one-week sessions each quarter in residence, got these unbelievable lectures in management and HR and accounting and everything that crisis management that you would need to know to run a business successfully. And then all the homework in the 3 months in between to read up and do some lessons. And for me, that was a huge turning point in my practice. It's when I really learned that I needed to fire some people. It's when I learned that I needed to be better about understanding my books. And it wasn't, how do I keep someone from stealing from me? How do I, what do I do with that problem patient? What am I going to do with employees that aren't fitting in? All of those things were great lessons, let alone the marketing side, which is what Kellogg is known for, to make sure I was putting the word out there of who I am and representing myself properly. So it was an unbelievable opportunity and a great experience for me.
I've only known a handful of surgeons who have gone that extra mile because that's how I've made my living. I did go to school. I did get an MBA. And so I thought, wait a second, you surgeons can't be everything. You can't be the surgeon and the business person and the marketing person. So I thought, you be the surgeon, I'll be the business and marketing consultant, and we'll get this in shape, because you don't have the luxury of waiting 4 years to figure this out. You have to really hit the ground running when you go solo and 100%. The overhead starts. And it's so, all you want to do is hide in the OR most of the time, and you want to ignore the rest. And someone's got to deal with that. So you either have to pay for it or figure it out yourself. And then you're spending all weekend trying to figure out how to do a website. Then you start studying SEO. Then you start studying how do you hire staff, and how do you market? And oh my gosh, there's nothing easy. I do not envy you in today's world. The surgeon has now also added to his to-do list. He's also the front man, and he has to be the content creator because you are the content, and it's just never ending. Yeah.
I mean, the people that have figured out how to do that successfully are obviously doing really, really well. There's a lot of different versions of that content creation, and maybe the most important thing is what you're comfortable with. At this point, I have the luxury of being 26 years in the business and successful, and a lot of that kind of takes care of itself, thank goodness. But we still work really hard to have a great website, to have a good Instagram social media platform where we're exposed, and Dr. Stark has hers, and we really want to be out there, but I'm very selective in what's out there. I want everybody to know who I am and what I do, but maybe not every intimate detail like some people do.
Some people have a knack for it. Some surgeons, they just have a knack for it. They have hundreds of thousands of followers. They love it. They're also up 3 hours a night answering the DMs. Like they really are into it. But a lot of them, those I would say are the kind of the younger ones. But then I can't even say that because I woke up this morning and there's a guy, doing live surgery, chit-chatting away. He's doing a live Instagram. And I thought, some people just can't get enough of this. And it's just who your personality is and and your brand. What are you trying to portray to the world? I would just say be you. If that's your thing, do it. But if it's not, don't force it.
100%, because number one, that's going to come across, as disingenuous, and
real crunchy.
Two, you're really putting yourself at risk when you're doing things that you aren't really like on top of and paying attention to. I actually had I did a little Instagram thing the other day, which I'll think about next time, where I talked from the operating room, and I got a DM from a patient who said, or a prospective patient who said, I want my surgeon paying attention in the operating room, and they can do their Instagram when they're not in there. And it's a good point. It certainly can give you a little bit of perspective when people respond to certain things you do negatively as well. So
I agree. At least you weren't dancing and doing surgery, because we have seen that, and that's brutal. I mean, that's bad things have happened.
You still have to be professional. You have to show everybody who you are that way as well.
Right. So give me one big mistake that others can learn from when they're trying to grow the practice.
Well, I'll give you two. One I started to mention before. The first one is simply not being in charge of your employees. It's hard. I'm a really nice person, and I try to have everybody like me to a fault. And I think that was the biggest detriment in my practice was thinking that I could just have everybody like me and I'd be able to convince everybody to do a great job. And there are just some people that don't fit in. And so for me, the biggest mistake that we talked about already is let go of people early if they're not the right employee, because it makes a toxic work environment. You're going to lose other employees because of it that aren't good. And ultimately that affects your patient's clinical experience as well. So that's for sure number one. Number two goes back to what we were just talking about, which is the marketing and the Instagram and the social media. Paying a lot of money for that stuff doesn't really get you anywhere. If you want to be a big social media person, you have to figure out how you're generating that authentically, not how somebody's, because we've spent money on that, and it's sort of like phone book ads from years ago. None of those really work that well either, and people spend a lot of money on it. So the idea is if that's your goal and you want to build up that reputation, do it very genuinely. You're not going to buy it. It doesn't happen that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, then let's go to social media. You do have 115,000 followers, so somebody is working on your Instagram account. Are you paying to play? Do you have somebody full staff? Do you have an agency?
I have somebody full staff. I actually, one of the front office people, her goal is to ultimately leave me and start her own social media marketing company. And so she's really great at videos, and she's really great at responding to things, and she's really great at putting things out there. So we're working very hard to utilize her skills, coming into the operating room to film, coming, into the clinic and talking to me about things, working with Dr. Stark, and really getting us out there in a personable way. One of the big strengths I think I have is that patients really realize how genuine my goals for them are and my care and concern for them are. And being able to get that out on your social so that people actually know who you are before they ever come is huge.
Any secrets for getting the patients to approve their photos on social media or
It's
on your
really hard.
website?
I think the biggest part is number one, we talk to them about it ahead of time. We try to talk to them
Right?
in their pre-op appointments. We don't do
Thank
it after
you.
surgery, and by God, for sure, don't do it the day of surgery when they're nervous and scared. So
I
what we
mean,
do is,
wait, this is such an important point. I
yeah,
always say to everybody, it's the timing. You don't ask them at the wrong time because you're going
right,
to get an answer you don't want. You have it when it's still just a conversation,
right,
way at the beginning.
right.
At the beginning. It's just a little conversation you're having, so you're not surprising them with it later.
Right. So once patients schedule for surgery in our practice, they get a whole packet of information. They actually get right from their first phone call, they get a link to our Touch MD system where they can go on and review any pre and post-op instruction. And we have a collection of surgical patient forms on there where they can look and see that one of them is the consent for photos, whether it's the consent for videos during surgery, the consent for before and after pictures. So they've seen that. Then when they come in for their pre-op appointment, which is 2 weeks before, then when I'm sitting there telling them, hey, you're going to do so great and I'm really excited to do your surgery, I would really love to be able to use your photographs once we're done. We'll make sure they're anonymous. We'll make sure that tattoos are photoshopped and jewelry's not showing or whatever you need. Then there's a much higher conversion rate right at that point for them to do that. And then I think the last point of that is when I see them, I see pretty much all my patients at their 6-month post-op appointment because I want to see how they're doing. I want them to know how much I care about how they're doing. And I want to be able to ask them again then because I won't show any before and afters until 6 months. So until then, it doesn't matter. So I want to be the one to talk to them again if they haven't consented previously. And I think that helps as well.
This is where we do differ. I'm that patient. I've had quite a bit of cosmetic surgery, so I know firsthand.
Yeah.
6 months by now, I'm so acclimated to it. The glee and I'm not ecstatic anymore. I'm
Right.
happy. I'm happy, but I'm not ecstatic.
Right.
The timing on that is so crucial when they are like, you are God. I love you. You have transformed my life. I love my body. That's when you want to grab that.
Right.
You know,
It's a great point. It's a great point.
Yeah. So the marketing channels, would you say Instagram is your, I mean, do you have many poles in the pond or is it all under
No,
Instagram?
we really just have Instagram and then our website. About 90% of my patients come from word of mouth. So, most of that, the marketing side of it is the younger patient coming in for a breast augmentation or a mommy makeover. It's not the facelifts and secondary breast surgery and a lot of the other things that my practice is heavy with. But we definitely have a big presence for those two things on our social and on our website because those are the people who are shopping. Those are the people who are looking at multiple sites and they want to see what multiple surgeons have done and they want to see how many before and afters you have, let alone how good they are. And so those areas we pay attention to. Because we think that's where you capture patients that don't know the practice.
Do you have any process for increasing the word of mouth referrals naturally?
That's a good question. I would have to say not a strong one, honestly. I think it's pretty organic for me, but I'm open to hear what you're thinking.
I just know that if you're doing a good job of that right now organically, that's fantastic. But there's so much money left on the table when you get more strategic with it. So I would just brainstorm with your team. How can we make that happen naturally?
Right.
But it's a process. So,
Right.
for example, I love a post-surgical goodie bag. And in the goodie bag are just fun things. It's thank you for being my patient. I hope you had a great experience with us. And it has your tchotchkes, maybe, your water bottle or skincare, a couple of skincare samples because you
Right.
need them to come back for that.
Right.
And then there are a couple referral cards in there and then a review instruction sheet, how to give us a review. And
Right.
it's just a fun goodie bag because we women love goodie bags and we will go to great lengths to get one. So it's kind of like gifts with surgery. And then it might have a little gift card to experience something in the med spa. But the point is you've given them a prop, like 2 referral cards to give to their friends.
Right.
And it's just a subtle way to say, oh, to the patient, oh my God, I can put these in my wallet and I'll pass them out to my friends. something like that.
Right.
I'm spending more time on that right now because SEO is getting tough.
Right.
Digital marketing is getting tough. It's getting competitive. It's getting expensive. PPC ads are out of control.
Yep.
So I just think, what's your next best bet? Go get the friends. Go get the friends and family, but figure out how to do it in a nice, subtle way. But you're saying, I'd really appreciate, tell them where you got it, kind of thing. I'd really appreciate your friends and family, and I'll take good care of them.
Right. So we kind of definitely do a bit of that. There's definitely products for patients after surgery. We discount their first year in the med spa after surgery. We give them some treatments with our esthetician. So we kind of make sure they're coming back. We have a Schwartz Perks. It's our incentive program in the spa so that patients are getting rewarded for recurring visits with discounts, etc. So we do those things, but maybe not quite as specifically as you described, which is great.
Well, whatever you can do to make that happen, because I don't think you can count on it. In today's world, there's too much pummeling us all day. And the patients love you, but are not thinking about growing your practice for you. They're thinking about their own lives. So I'm just always trying to come up with, how could I just make that clear, that we would really love other patients just like you.
Right. Nice little reminder.
Right. So what about, your growth or your exit strategy? Are you thinking about wrapping it up? Are you going to stay forever?
No, I'm definitely not staying forever. So at this point in my career, I've slowed down just a touch. I'm only working 4 days a week. I'm trying to really manage my personal time. All of my kids are grown and out of the house, and thankfully very successful in the things they're doing. And what a blessing that is. So whether it's traveling to see them or taking time for my wife and I, or just doing things just for me, I'm definitely migrating towards that. The flip side is I'm trying to figure out how I manage my time so I'm not cutting back on my operating room time, which is where the dollar per hour comes from. So I do surgery 3 days a week. I see consults 1 day a week, and then I have a 3-day weekend every weekend. And that has kept my sanity as well. Surgeon burnout is a huge thing. We work really, really hard. I always tell people it's the only thing in the world where you're expected to bat 1,000. If you're not perfect, you're not good enough. And that's both unreasonable and impossible. So it's really hard to stay at the top of your game and stay happy no matter how good you are. So you have to take care of yourself. I figure I'm 63. I figure, by the time I'm 70, I really want to be very slowed down and if not done. And so that's where I think having an associate come in, we're already going to look at who that next associate's going to be to join her. Because I think that's, I want to be here both to mentor that person and to be value for that person to be willing to come, and also to support, like you said, the big practice that we've built. And then by that point, I hope that, my expectation is uncertain at this point. In a perfect world, I'd love to have my associate become a partner in the very near future, and then have both of us decide how we interface with private equity, whether that works just for the med spa, whether that works for my OR, or whether that works for our practice, which I honestly think is less likely. A lot of those ambitious things have failed recently. So because people realize what a key man thing plastic surgery is, and selling your practice means you're leaving and you're not working. And I think that's a huge issue. But if I have 2 young associates here and they get busy and I can show those numbers, then maybe all 3 of us can benefit from that kind of exit strategy fairly to everyone, because everyone's contributing in their own way. So that's kind of my goal, is to see how that works in the future and to do it very transparently with my young associate, hopefully partner, and whoever we hope to bring in after that.
And then maybe you can switch Schwartz plastic surgery to S plastic surgery. Isn't her last name with an S?
It's a great idea. It won't stay the Schwartz Aesthetic Institute, I think, once I'm obviously transitioning out. I don't think that's fair. And quite frankly, it's not that great of a last name anyway. So we'll think of something prettier. But in all fairness, it will be something that's a great start to the thought process.
But you can't help it, because social media forces, they need to know your name.
Right.
So to do that, you have to have a name. But then when you're going to exit, I don't need a name anymore. I need this thing to go generic. And frankly, there's not a good answer for that. There isn't. I don't have one.
Yeah, there's not, but I think we'll make it the Aesthetic Institute, or we'll make it something.
Right.
It'll be an umbrella that works for everyone. Exactly.
Right. All right. So last question. Tell us something we don't know about you already.
Um, well, I mean, I think if you ask my wife, because I thought about this, like what could I share? It would be that I'm not your typical plastic surgeon. I think most plastic surgeons are a lot more type A than I am, and a little more OCD. They're certainly probably neater than me. My closet's pretty good right now, but there's moments of, less, on the top of my desk or whatever. Um, but overall, I think that, when it comes to the actual work that we do, I'm the same as everybody. I think the other thing is for me, it's always been about the artistic side of it. I started when I was young doing photography and ceramics. I had two potter's wheels by the time I was done with high school and a kiln in my backyard. We had a home with it used to be a greenhouse in the backyard, and I bricked it in and put all that stuff out there and a waterbed and had my own little man cave that was my art studio. And I continued all that all through college and beyond. I literally carted a potter's wheel around with me the first few moves that my wife and I did. Um, when I went to residency, it was one of the big criteria that one of the professors had was being able to see things in 3 dimensions. And I think ceramics and plastic surgery have a real mix that goes together. So for me, it's being an artistic person, being able to have that both right brain and left brain to do what we do. And I guess most importantly, the big thing about me is just that, there's a lot of great surgeons in the world, but I think that being able to convey how much you care about your patients and how much you don't just want a great outcome because it's going to mean your next patient comes or you get paid at the end of the day. It's a great outcome because you care that that patient gets what they wanted and that they're happy and that it's safe. And for me, those are the things that have made me successful, I think.
And the patient feels that.
They do. They know when it's genuine.
I just have to ask one more tip. How in the world have you stayed married for 35 years?
I chose
That's
well.
amazing.
I chose well. My wife is an amazing woman. She is loyal, devoted, intelligent. She's a great mom. She chose that role and we were able to raise 4 great kids. And, we've done the work to make it happen. Every marriage has its good side and its bad side. Being a surgeon doesn't mean you're around a lot of times when other people wish you would be. So she's been my partner in all of it all the way. And I've taken advantage of her gifts and I've respected her needs and she's taken care of me. And together we are very blessed. So I chose really well.
Congratulations for that. Did
Thank
any of the kids follow in your footsteps?
No, I have my oldest son actually went to Stanford, got an MBA and started his own company. My second child, our daughter, is a technical recruiter. So she recruits engineers for a tech company. Our 2 youngest are twins, boy and girl twins. One's in doing engineering at Rice, and the other one is my artist. She's a product design major at Carnegie Mellon. So no doctors, nobody. I think they all. My oldest son actually started pre-med, and one of the kids across the hall in the dorm cut his foot, and there was blood everywhere. And he called me the next day and said he transferred to the business school. So nobody's a doctor.
Are you disappointed or are you okay with that?
No, I'm fine with it. I think, medicine's a hard path. And ultimately, it's probably the really great piece of advice is if it's not your passion, don't do it.
For sure.
It's got a huge amount of demand. It's got a huge amount of responsibility. And it's technically difficult what we do. And I'm very, very thankful for the gifts I was given and the opportunities to, turn that into what I do every day. I don't know that I knew I was going to take this path when I was young. I definitely didn't. But I'm glad I found it. So it was the perfect thing for me. Yeah. But it's not for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I congratulate you. You've done a great job and good work-life balance too.
Thank you.
So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, I do know your website is drschwartz.com, drschwartz.com. Is there any other way they can get a hold of you?
They can email. They can literally send. I have what's called catch-all email. It's a good advice for anybody starting a business is to have what's called catch-all email, where no matter what they put in front of the @ sign, you're still going to see it.
Okay.
Eventually, you have to get rid of that because there's too much stuff. But you can just send it to doc at drschwartz.com, and I'll be happy to answer anybody that would have any questions from anything we discussed.
Well, you're a wealth of experience and information and skill, and good for you. Thank you so much, Dr. Schwartz.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone, that is going to wrap it up for us today. I really appreciate you listening in. If you enjoyed this and got some value out of it, I sure would love a review and subscribe to Beauty in the Biz podcast so you don't miss any more. And if you want to do a complimentary consultation with me on the business and marketing side of plastic surgery, you can set that up at my website, catherinemaley.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. And we will see you again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want. But you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.